The deck of the research vessel was strangely quiet when the drone finally resurfaced. The ocean around the ship lay still, dark and indifferent, as if unaware of what had just happened 2.5 miles beneath its surface. The winch hauled Cerberus X-1 from the frigid water, droplets cascading off its metallic frame like molten glass. But something felt wrong. Even before the drone was fully aboard, the entire crew sensed it. The machine was vibrating, not from mechanical malfunction, but from something deeper. A resonance, a hum, a low-frequency tremor that pulsed through the hull of the drone like a heartbeat, out of sync with the ocean. The engineers rushed to the platform, tools in hand. The lead operator shut down the thrusters, but the vibration continued for several seconds before fading slowly, like the last note of a distant bell disappearing into the fog. No one spoke immediately. The crew gathered around the drone as if approaching a wounded animal that might suddenly leap to life. They had all seen the footage, the door, the handprint, the impossible movement, the eyes behind the porthole, the void, the presence following the drone through the Titanic's corridors. Everyone had seen it, and nobody understood it. The drone was lifted onto the deck cradle, and the tether was disconnected. The moment the umbilical cable detached, the main monitor inside the control room flickered alive even though no one had activated playback. A single screen appeared. Automatic preservation sequence initiated. The engineers froze. The drone did not have any automatic preservation sequence. No one had programmed such a function. And yet the system was running. The feed switched to a new view. The drone's internal black box memory was compiling fragments of data, scraps of sonar, corrupted frames, unreadable audio spikes, and visual artifacts that looked like static but moved with intention. It wasn't random noise. It was a pattern. The sonar images reassembled themselves into a shape. Not a human shape, not an animal, but something elongated, towering with limbs that seemed too long, and a torso that bent at impossible angles. The silhouette, taken from echoes inside the void, was clearer now than it had been during the live feed. One of the researchers stepped backward, nearly tripping over the edge of a console. "That can't be structural interference," someone whispered. But the shape remained, unmoving, watching. A second box of data opened. The drone's thermal sensors had recorded something the crew had missed earlier. A temperature drop so sudden and so extreme that the reading flatlined. Literally flatlined. As if the sensor had been overwhelmed. The thermal graph displayed a downward spike, then a straight frozen line. Temperature of the void. Unknowable. Beyond measurable cold. Then the audio logs played. At first, just the silence of the deep. Then, something beneath it. A low, rhythmic pulse. Detected only after amplification. Almost like breathing. Slow, heavy, ancient. The same exhale the drone recorded when it was inside the Titanic. The researchers exchanged uneasy glances. The youngest crew member finally voiced the thought on everyone's mind. "Something down there," responded to the drone. The lead historian tightened his jaw. "No," he said quietly. "Something down there woke up." Before anyone could respond, the control room lights flickered. Only for a second, but long enough to send a chill through everyone present. The monitor flashed white, then displayed a still frame from the drone's rear camera, the final image before ascent. The dark shape, standing at the edge of the hull, half lost in shadows. Except now, enhanced by the system, the outline was unmistakable. A humanoid figure, tall, narrow, head slightly tilted, arms long enough to almost touch the floor. But the most disturbing part was this. The figure was leaning forward, as if watching the drone leave, as if aware, as if waiting. The lead operator wiped his forehead with a trembling hand. "What is that?" someone whispered. No one answered. because everyone felt the same thing in their stomachs. The Titanic wasn't abandoned. It was occupied, and something inside it had finally noticed that humans had returned, not as explorers, not as observers, but as intruders. The control room felt colder than before. The ocean outside was calm, the sky a dull sheet of gray. But inside the vessel, the air carried a heaviness that no one could explain. The footage was disturbing enough, but the drone itself seemed to echo what it had witnessed. Its frame vibrated faintly, even though it was completely powered down, as if something from the depths still clung to it. While the engineers debated mechanical explanations, the drone's internal diagnostics completed a second automatic report, another system that did not exist in its programming. The screen lit up. Void signal detected. Isolating frequency. A low hum filled the speakers, subtle at first, then rising just enough to be felt in the chest rather than heard by the ears. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. This wasn't electromagnetic interference. It wasn't oceanic background noise. It wasn't machinery. It was patterned, rhythmic, intentional. A frequency that pulsed in intervals. Long, long, short, long. Like a code sent from beneath the ocean floor. The sonar specialist leaned over the console, adjusting filters, isolating the signal. "It's not random," he muttered. "There's structure in it, like a message." The lead historian, still staring at the frozen image of the figure standing inside the Titanic, spoke quietly. "What if it is a message?" The specialist swallowed hard. "You mean from it?" No one corrected him. No one laughed. The room was far beyond skeptics and jokes now. Every person on the ship had seen enough to entertain the possibility that something inside the Titanic was reacting deliberately to the drone's intrusion. The audio signal pulsed again. This time, the lights flickered with it. The drone, completely offline, emitted a faint click, like a tap from metal deep inside its sealed hull. The operator stepped back as if the drone were alive. "We need to open it up," one of the engineers said shakily. "Scan the hardware. Maybe it's holding residual acoustic pressure." But even as he spoke, he knew the words were hollow. What they were witnessing wasn't physical resonance. The vibration wasn't tied to propulsion, wiring, or modulation. It was something else. Something that didn't belong in any engineering manual. The historian approached the console. "Replay the last few seconds before the drone exited the hull." The footage rewound. Darkness. Silt drifting like ash. The doorway behind the drone widening into the endless shadow of the void. Then, a flicker. A shape emerging. A hand, long, skeletal, reaching toward the opening. The historian froze the frame. That wasn't in the live feed. The operator checked the logs. He was right. That specific frame had not appeared in the initial transmission. The image had surfaced only in the drone's internal cache, processed after resurfacing, as if the drone had recorded something the system wasn't permitted to show until later. Or worse, as if something had inserted itself into the recording. The historian traced the outline on the screen with a trembling finger. The hand was wrong, too long, too thin. The proportions were distorted, as though stretched by the pressure of the deep, or by something not fully formed. Then, the sonar alert blared again. Ping, 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 faster this time. Urgent, agitated. The ocean beneath them was shifting. A new echo appeared on the sonar map, rising slowly from the depths. At first, just a blip, then a cluster of blips, then a shape large enough to trigger collision proximity warnings. But the Titanic lay still, unchanged. Whatever was rising from below wasn't the ship. The mapping specialist zoomed in. The color drained from his face. "It's the void signature," he whispered. Everyone turned to him. "What do you mean?" "The shape on sonar. It's the same as the void mapping from inside the door. The same warping. The same density distortion. The historian stepped closer. "You're saying the void is moving?" The specialist nodded slowly. "No natural structure behaves like this. Not at this depth. Not with this coherence." The hum grew louder. The drone clicked again. The sonar image pulsed, rising, 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 until it stopped abruptly at 300 meters. Hundreds of meters above the Titanic. And then it held position, as if whatever it was had chosen to stop, had chosen to wait, had chosen to listen. The historian stared at the sonar screen. "It's tracking us." A silence, heavier than the ocean itself, settled over the room. Then, without warning, the ship's long-range communication system crackled to life. A burst of static, a distorted echo, a low, dragging exhale, the same exhale recorded inside the wreck. The crew froze. The static shifted. A voice, impossibly faint, slipped through. Not human. Not machine. A sound, shaped wrong, stretched wrong, like a whisper spoken through water. A single word emerged, warped and trembling. "Open." The room fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed. The drone frame vibrated again. The sonar pulse repeated. The void signature began rising again, slow, steady, approaching. Something from deep inside the Titanic, something behind the void door, was coming up. The ship's engines thrummed beneath the crew's feet, but the sound that filled the control room had nothing to do with machinery. It was the hum, the same low, bone-deep vibration the drone had carried with it from the wreck. Except now it wasn't coming from the drone. It was coming from the ocean. The sonar screen glowed with a shape that hovered in impossible suspension, hundreds of meters above the Titanic, as if gravity itself had loosened its rules for whatever lingered in the deep. Currents at that depth were unpredictable, but nothing naturally rose in perfectly vertical alignment with a research vessel unless pushed by an external force. Or unless it was following something. The lead operator's voice cracked as he spoke. "It's approaching our depth." The hum deepened. Metal beams in the ship's hull quivered. Loose tools rattled across a table. Something vast and invisible pressed against the water beneath them. The communication system crackled once more. Not static this time, but a dragging, wet distortion, like sound traveling through a thick medium. The crew stepped back instinctively, as if the voice itself had weight. The audio specialist, hands shaking, isolated the signal. A whisper seeped through again. "Open!" Followed by a second word, distorted beyond human articulation. "Return." The historian swallowed hard. "It's connected to the drone." The operator nodded. "It reacted when we pulled the drone out of the void." The historian stared at the sonar display, at the mass rising from the deep. "Then what happens when it gets here?" No one answered. Instead, the sonar alarm blared again. New contact, range decreasing. The void signature was now at 2,900 meters, rising faster, then faster still. The ocean was accelerating it. The pressure changes alone should have torn any biological organism apart. But the signature didn't distort, didn't break, didn't dissolve. It remained intact, solid, purposeful. "Get the drone back online," the operator ordered. "But why?" the engineer protested. "If this thing is heading toward us." "We need to know what it wants," the historian snapped. It responded to the drone. It followed the drone. It whispered, "Return." That's a message. We need to see if the drone detects anything. The drone powered on with a soft hum, then jerked violently, as if yanked by an unseen force. The operator stepped back. "What the?" The drone's lights flickered, then stabilized. The onboard monitor lit up with a message the system had no function to display. Connection established. Connection to what? Before anyone could answer, the drone emitted a sound. Not mechanical, not digital, something like A heartbeat. Slow, deep, echoing from inside the drone's carbon frame. The hum in the ocean grew louder, syncing itself to the drone's pulse-like vibration. The sonar image pulsed too, as if the rising mass and the drone now shared the same rhythm. The historian whispered, "It's calling to the drone." The operator's voice trembled. "Or the drone is calling it." The void signature reached 2,500 meters. Closer. Then 2,300. Then 2,100. "It shouldn't be able to move this fast," the sonar specialist muttered. "Nothing at that depth should move vertically without propulsion." "Unless it doesn't need propulsion," the historian replied softly. "Unless it isn't moving through the water." He pointed at the sonar distortion, which flickered like a glitch in reality. "But through something else." The crew stared at him. "What are you saying?" the operator asked. The historian exhaled shakily. "Inside the Titanic, behind that door, the void absorbed sonar. It wasn't a room. It wasn't a chamber. It was a space that didn't obey physics as we know them." "So, a tear?" someone whispered. "A fracture." "A place outside of the ship," the historian said, "that somehow attached itself to the ship." "And now it's attached to us," the operator murmured, staring at the drone vibrating on the table. The hum reached a painful resonance, rattling the control panels. A glass monitor cracked. The lights dimmed. The void signature surged upward again, this time jumping 400 meters in one leap. 1,700 meters. Then 1,300. Then 1,000. The communication speaker crackled violently. Something was close enough now that its presence distorted radio waves. The whisper returned, clearer this time. "Open. Return. Below." The historian staggered backward. "It's not speaking to us. It's speaking to the drone." The drone's external lights turned on without command. They flickered twice, then pointed downward, toward the ocean below, as if signaling, inviting. The sonar image swelled suddenly, doubling, then tripling in size, as if the void was expanding. "Oh, God," the operator breathed. The mass rose again. 900 meters, 750, 600. The researcher slammed his fist on the console. "If it reaches the hull, it could tear the whole ship apart. We need to move." The captain's voice erupted over the intercom. "Engines up, full thrust. Change heading north-northwest." The vessel lurched as the engines roared to life, but the sonar image didn't slow. It followed, matching speed, matching course. The void was locked onto them. And then, thud. Every head turned toward the ship's underbelly. Something had struck the hull from below. Something vast. Something heavy. Something that should not exist 2 miles above the Titanic. The crew froze. The ship shuddered violently. Then came the second blow. Thud. Thud. The humming deepened. And the drone whispered. Not the audio logs. Not the speakers. The drone itself, vibrating so intensely it formed sound. "Open the door!" The historian's knees nearly buckled. The void signature wrapped itself beneath the ship like a massive, unseen shadow. The final sonar reading blinked on screen. Unknown object encompassing lower hull range. 15 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. Contact imminent. The drone's lights flared blinding white. Then, the entire vessel went dark. Darkness swallowed the ship so completely that for a moment, no one breathed. The emergency lights did not flicker on. Backup power did not engage. Every monitor, every control panel, every instrument went dead at the same instant. It wasn't a power failure. It felt like the ocean had reached up and pulled the electricity out of the vessel by hand. The crew stood frozen in the pitch blackness, hearing only the distant roar of the engines dying, and the low, vibrating hum of something beneath the hull. That hum crawled up through the floor, into their bones, into their teeth. a frequency that felt more like a presence than a sound. Someone whispered, "It's inside the hull." But nobody corrected him, because deep down, everyone felt the same fear, a fear older than language. They weren't alone anymore. A sudden, sharp metallic groan tore through the ship's frame. It didn't sound like anything breaking apart. It sounded like something pressing inward, testing, searching, running its fingers along the outer hull. The historian forced himself to whisper, "Flashlights. Turn on your flashlights." Shuffling, trembling hands. Beams of white light sliced through the dark, weak, jittering circles dancing on equipment and walls. The control room looked strange in the dim illumination, shadows stretching unnaturally long. But the worst part? The drone's eyes were glowing. Even with the power offline, Cerberus X1's twin front camera lights pulsed with a soft, unnatural white-blue glow. Like something inside it was waking. The operator stepped back. "Those LEDs can't activate without power. They physically can't. They're not even wired for—" Click. The lights grew brighter. The drone vibrated, harder than before. Tools rattled on the counter. A metal clipboard fell to the ground with a clang. The hum from beneath the ship matched the drone's vibration in perfect rhythm, as if the two were speaking the same language now. An engineer leaned closer, flashlight shaking. "We need to disconnect its internal battery." Click, click. The drone turned its cameras, slowly, deliberately, toward the crew. Everyone stepped back at once. The machine didn't move physically, but its lens shifted with a mechanical slowness that felt disturbingly alive, like an animal turning its head. The historian whispered, "It's not looking at us." He swallowed, hard. "It's looking through us." Another massive groan rippled through the hull. This one louder, angrier. A warping, twisting sound as something pressed along the underside of the ship. The floor vibrated. The consoles trembled. "Engine room report!" the captain shouted, through a dead intercom system that shouldn't have worked at all. Yet somehow the sound reached them faintly through a single speaker. The voice from below was panicked. "Something is moving under us, sir. It's like—" Static swallowed the rest. Then a scream. Metal screeched. Something heavy crashed. Then silence. The historian covered his mouth. Another tremor rippled through the ship. Not from outside this time, from inside the walls. Pipes shook violently. Loose wiring swung overhead, tapping in unnerving patterns. The drone's glow intensified. Its cameras focused directly on the floor, as if sensing something rising. Then, boom. The entire ship lurched upward. People were thrown off their feet. Flashlights scattered across the floor. A console detached from the wall and slammed over. Someone cried out in pain. Water sloshed somewhere deep in the lower decks. The operator grabbed the historian's arm. "It's lifting us. Whatever's under us is pushing us upward." The historian's face drained of color. "It followed the drone. It wants the drone back inside the void." The floor vibrated again, this time a steady, pulsing pressure against the hull. It felt deliberate, communicative. The drone's speakers crackled, even though all systems remained offline. A voice whispered through it. Not human, not electronic. Something stretched and suffocated by depth. "Return. Below." The drone glowed brighter, and then, in the faint light, a thin line of seawater trickled down the control room wall. A new breach, tiny, but growing. A sign that the ship could not survive long against whatever was touching it. The captain burst into the control room, flashlight in one hand, emergency toolkit in the other. "We need engines online now. What happened to our power?" No one had an answer. But then, they all heard the same sound again. A heavy, dragging scrape moving along the underside of the hull, circling the ship slowly, like a predator deciding where to bite next. The historian pointed at the drone. "It won't stop until it gets that drone back." The captain's jaw tightened. "We're not sending anything, or anyone, back down there." The sonar specialist whispered, "We may not have a choice. It's forcing us." More water dripped through the wall. The ship creaked. The drone's glow flared violently, lighting up the room with a ghostly pale blue pulse. Then, a message flickered across its dead display screen, even though no power was connected. "Come back." The historian staggered back. "It's not calling to the drone anymore?" The operator felt every hair on his arms rise. "It's calling us." A new alarm began to ring, a shrill, desperate siren that required no power at all. Not electronic, mechanical. It was the hull integrity alarm, because something outside was pushing against the ship, hard. The sonar display, briefly flickering back to life, showed the void signature now fully wrapped around the vessel. Then, the hull groaned again, louder, bending, warping, as if the deep itself was closing its fist around the ship. The hull of the research vessel moaned like a wounded animal. A deep metallic howl reverberated through every corridor, shaking bolts, straining rivets, bending beams that were never designed to withstand pressure like this. Not at the surface, not this far from the crushing depths. The void presence pressed harder. The vibration surged through the ship in waves, each one more violent than the last. Flashlights trembled in the crew's hands as shadows wavered across the room, bending, stretching, twisting with every tilt of the vessel. A sudden jerk threw several people to the floor. The entire ship leaned sharply to port side, as though some colossal force had hooked itself beneath the hull and was pulling. The captain clung to a railing. "Engage emergency ballast now!" "It's not responding," the engineer cried. "Sir, the controls are dead. Every system is offline except—" He froze. Except the drone. Cerberus X1 glowed brighter than ever, as if its core were burning from inside. The metal casing of the drone trembled violently, rattling against the table clamps. One clamp snapped, then another, then a third. The drone was breaking free. "Get away from it!" the operator shouted. But they barely had time to react. Crack. The last clamp tore loose. The drone slid across the table. Not rolling, not tumbling, but gliding, pulled by something unseen. It stopped abruptly at the very edge, its bright camera lights pointing downward through the floor. The historian understood first. "It wants to go back," the operator shook his head. "Back? There's 2 miles of water between us and—" Thud. A massive impact hammered the hull from below, shaking the entire ship. Panels loosened. Ceiling cables snapped and fell like severed vines. A bookshelf toppled, sending charts and old maps spiraling across the control room. More water dripped through the walls. Another thud, harder. The historian whispered the truth no one wanted to accept. "It's trying to pull us down." The entire crew felt their stomachs drop. The sonar specialist, clutching a console for balance, stared at the flickering screen as it briefly powered on, showing one horrifying message. Object mass increasing. Enveloping lower hull descent initiated. "No. No, no, no," he whispered. "It's dragging us back to the Titanic." The drone's glow pulsed more violently. The onboard screen flickered again, despite having no power source. "Bring it back." Then a second line appeared. "The void waits." Before they could react, the ship lurched downwards, not forward, not sideways, but straight down. The deck tilted. People slid across the floor. Flashlights tumbled, beams scattering wildly. "We're descending!" the navigator screamed. "It's pulling us under!" The captain grabbed the nearest railing with white-knuckled hands. "Cut loose anything it's attached to! Deploy emergency flotation!" "Nothing's responding!" the engineer shouted. "The hull isn't breached yet. It's just... He couldn't finish. Another tremor rippled upward through the ship. A long, dragging scrape. Like fingers, moving up the steel. Slowly, deliberately. Everyone went silent. The scrape continued for several seconds, traveling from the lower decks to the midsection. Then it stopped. Right beneath their feet, silence, thick, heavy, suffocating. Then, bang! A single devastating strike hit the hull directly beneath the control room. Dust fell from the ceiling. A light fixture shattered. Someone screamed. The crew backed away instinctively as the floor bulged upward. Just a few millimeters, but enough to prove the presence could deform reinforced steel like soft clay. The historian whispered, trembling, "It doesn't want the ship, it wants the drone." They all looked at Cerberus X-1, still glowing, still vibrating, still pointed downward, like a beacon calling to something ancient and enormous. The operator swallowed hard. "If we give it the drone, will it stop?" No one could answer. Another bang blasted the hull. Then another. Then another. Rapid, rhythmic, building in intensity. The vessel shuddered with each impact. The captain made the call. "Prepare to release the drone." The historian spun toward him. "That could make it worse. Or it could save everyone on this ship," the captain snapped. "We have seconds before the hull collapses." Water spurted through a widening crack near the floor. The void presence pressed harder. Bang, bang, bang! The drone's glow intensified until its entire frame radiated with blinding white light. The operator approached it slowly, hands trembling, reaching for the manual release lever. Click. The drone stopped vibrating. Everything went still. The hum from beneath the ship ceased. Even the ocean outside grew quiet. Too quiet. The historian whispered, "What just happened?" Then the drone's screen flashed. Not a message this time. An image. A perfect, high-resolution frame from inside the Titanic. The freestanding steel door. Wide open. A dark void behind it. And in that void, a figure, tall, motionless, waiting. The drone spoke one last time. "Return below." The lights flickered back on across the ship. The sonar updated. The void signature began descending, slowly, deliberately, releasing the vessel. The ship steadied in the water. The impact stopped. The scraping ceased. The hum faded. The pressure equalized. The void was retreating. But the historian stared at the screen in horror. Because in the last few frames, captured just before the void signature sank too deep to track again, the figure in the doorway had moved closer, much closer, almost to the threshold, almost stepping out. And the drone had recorded one last chilling detail. The door behind the figure was no longer attached to anything. No hinges, no frame, no ship. It was floating, following the figure, as if the door itself wanted to return, wanted to reopen, wanted to be found again. The screen went dark, and part 2 ended with a truth no one dared speak. Whatever lived inside the Titanic wasn't finished.